They didn't even wait for the doctor to say I was stable. My daughter stood near the foot of my hospital bed, whispering to my son as if I couldn't hear. "The house should go to you," she said. "You're the oldest." I'd just survived a heart attack. My left arm was still shaking from the IV drip. My eyes were half shut, but my ears worked just fine. And all I heard was planning. Not for recovery, not for my care, but for division, as if I was a leftover meal and they were scraping the plate. That night, my son called someone on speaker in the hallway. "Yeah, it's a 3-bedroom, corner lot, prime resale value," he said. Then he laughed. I didn't interrupt, I didn't flinch. I just looked at the ceiling tile that had a tiny crack in it and thought, this wasn't a mistake, this was a message. The door slammed harder the next morning when they left. Not a goodbye, just a cold draft that followed. They didn't know the title was still in my name. They didn't know who I'd been speaking with quietly over the last 6 months. They didn't know I had one last story left in me, and they definitely didn't know. I wasn't planning to leave the house to either of them. I smiled when the nurse brought my tea. "Stay till the end. You'll see why I gave everything to a stranger, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories." They didn't always hate me, but I don't know when the love turned into quiet calculation. Maybe it was the day their father passed and they saw me sign the property papers alone. Maybe it was earlier. Maybe it was always there. I was still mourning when they brought up the house. "Mummy, you should downsize. A smaller place would be easier for you," my daughter had said, voice dipped in false concern. She didn't look me in the eye. She was already scanning the living room, probably picturing where her daughter's toys would go. I smiled. I always smiled. Mothers are taught to absorb first, then understand later. My son moved in first. "Just for a few weeks," he said. He brought his wife, then her cousin, then their cat. None of them left. I didn't complain when they changed my bedroom curtains without asking, or when my tea kettle disappeared and was replaced with a shiny electric thing I never figured out how to use. They brought loud shoes, louder music, and the kind of laughter that didn't reach me. Once, I came into the kitchen to find them laughing over a meme about elders who forget where they put their dentures. My name was on the mug they were drinking from. They didn't stop when I walked in. "Mummy, we're just joking," she said once. "Don't be so sensitive." And my son smirked, like a schoolboy catching his teacher flinch. Every week, something of mine disappeared. My shawl, my Bible, my old photos. Decluttering, they said. My own home began to smell like someone else's perfume. Their food didn't taste like mine. Their voices overtook the silence I used to enjoy. Their footsteps grew heavier, but their presence felt colder. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a waiting room, and they were waiting for me to leave. The real turning point came during dinner. I had made lentil soup. No one touched it. "This again?" his wife said, loud enough to echo. "Ma, you should try YouTube recipes," my daughter added. "Maybe something modern for once." I looked down at the soup. It was my husband's favorite. My son used to ask for second helpings when he was small. They scraped their plates clean after ordering pizza. I sat quietly at the table while they laughed over garlic sauce. That night, they watched a movie I couldn't follow, something about a haunted house. The daughter-in-law nudged my son and whispered, "Too bad we don't have ghosts. Maybe that would speed things up." They both laughed. I didn't. Later, I found a document on the dining table, typed, neatly formatted, a suggested breakdown of the house for future planning. Each room had a name beside it. Mine wasn't on it. I went to my room, closed the door slowly, so it wouldn't creak, and for the first time in months, I locked it. That was when I realized they weren't going to wait for me to die. They were going to take everything while I was still breathing, and they weren't going to make it look like murder. They were going to make it look like mercy. A favor. A gift I didn't ask for. The next morning, they offered me tea in a paper cup. My china set, gone. I sipped in silence, smiling as if nothing had shifted. But inside, something had broken. Not my heart, no. That had already been cracked, worn, and sealed over too many times to break now. What broke was the idea that they still loved me. They didn't. And now that I knew that, I stopped pretending I didn't. I stopped warning them about wet floors. I stopped folding towels no one thanked me for. I stopped asking if they'd be home for dinner. I started watching. Closely. I wrote things down. I saved receipts. I noticed who took what from the pantry and who opened my drawer when they thought I was asleep, and I started keeping a diary. They thought I was fading, but I was collecting. They thought I was soft, but I was sharpening. And when my son came into my room one day, holding a real estate brochure and saying, "Ma, wouldn't a nursing home near the hills be relaxing?" I just nodded and smiled, because I had already sent an email that morning to someone they didn't know, someone who remembered what respect looked like, someone they'd call a stranger, but who felt more like family than they ever had. It started with the medicine, my morning pills, calcium, blood pressure, one for inflammation. I lined them up carefully, like always, left to right, white, pink, beige. One morning, I found the pink ones missing. In their place, a blue capsule I didn't recognize. "Maybe you mixed them up," my daughter said without looking at me. Her voice had that bright, false cheer, the kind people use when they want to sound innocent. I hadn't mixed them. I never had. Later that week, I fainted in the hallway. The diagnosis was simple: wrong dosage. But the silence afterward said more than any chart ever could. "She's getting forgetful," my son said, just loud enough for me to hear from the next room. "Maybe it's time we stepped in," his wife whispered back. The next morning, I woke up to find the kitchen locked. The kitchen. My kitchen. The one I had designed with my husband when we couldn't afford tile. So we painted the floor ourselves. Now it had a lock and a note on the door that said, "Gas safety. Ask before entering. Ask before entering." My own home. I didn't argue. I just stepped back, walked quietly to the living room, where they were already eating toast and laughing at something on TV. They spoke over me more often now, or around me, like I was a wall they had to paint over. Once I tried to answer the phone, an old friend from church calling. My daughter-in-law snatched it mid-ring. "You shouldn't strain your ears, Mummy. I'll tell her you're resting." I wasn't resting. I wasn't tired. I was invisible. The real shift came on a Sunday. I had made lentil soup, the same recipe they grew up on, the one their father had loved. I placed it on the table, set with cloth napkins, silver cutlery. No one touched it. My son walked in with takeout. "Don't stress yourself, Ma. We ordered Chinese." They sat, laughing about hot sauce and fortune cookies, while I stood there holding a bowl no one asked for. "Next time, let us know, okay?" my daughter said. "Wasting food is not cute at your age." I looked down at the soup. Still steaming. Still waiting for a family that no longer existed. That night, I found a real estate brochure tucked between couch cushions. My son was flipping through listings for the neighborhood. He didn't close it when I entered the room, didn't even pretend to hide it. I said nothing, but something in me clicked. Not like a snap, more like a lock turning. A few days later, I saw them huddled over my old desk. I wasn't supposed to be walking that far, apparently. "Stay in your room, Ma, just rest." But I walked anyway. I peeked. They had printed forms. Power of attorney, will templates, blank signature lines. My son's pen was already uncapped. That evening, they staged a family conversation. I wasn't told in advance. I walked into it. They were sitting on the sofa, back straight, like a board meeting. My daughter smiled too wide. "Mum, we were just talking. You know, about your next chapter." I waited. "It's too much house for you," my son said. "All these rooms, the stairs, the bills." His wife added, "What if we handled it? You could move somewhere calmer, more manageable." They used words like comfort, peace, transition. But every word was dipped in vinegar. Then came the line that told me everything. Wouldn't it be nicer to give while you're still with us? They meant, sign it now, while you can still hold a pen, so we don't have to fake tears later. I looked at their faces, the mouths that once called me mummy when they scraped their knees, now tightened with greed. They weren't planning for my comfort. They were preparing for my absence. Before I even left. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote names, dates, incidents, the charger they lost, the medication they switched, the kitchen I wasn't safe in. I folded it all into a notebook, the kind with thick pages and a leather strap, the one my late husband had given me for our anniversary. He had once said, "Write down everything. People forget. Paper doesn't." He was right. The next morning, they laughed at something on my phone. My granddaughter had taken it and was scrolling through old photos. She showed one to her father and whispered, "She looked so old even back then." They laughed at my face, my body, my years. And I stood there holding the laundry basket, listening to them reduce my life to punchlines. That's when the numbness turned to steel. That's when I stopped being scared of being alone, because I already was. I put my notebook in the safe. I made a phone call to someone they wouldn't remember, someone from before they decided I didn't matter, and I said 6 words. "I'm ready. Let's go through with it." They thought they were planning my exit, but they didn't know. I had already started writing theirs. I stopped correcting their lies. When my daughter-in-law told a neighbor that I was practically bedridden, I just smiled. When my son joked that I once put salt in his tea by mistake, I nodded as if it were true. Let them build their narrative. I had already started writing mine. I began folding my clothes more slowly, each sleeve creased like a signature, each shawl wrapped into a perfect square. It calmed me, that act, folding something I still had control over. While they controlled the lights, the keys, the calendar, I controlled my silence. I stopped asking where they went at night, stopped waiting for leftovers at dinner, stopped showing up for conversations I wasn't invited into. They noticed. "She's drifting," my daughter said one evening, a little too loud. "We should get her tested," my son replied, as if my ears didn't still work just fine. I poured tea with steady hands, didn't spill a drop, didn't flinch. They started locking my bedroom window, said it was too drafty. They unplugged my bedside lamp, then forgot to plug it back. "You sleep better in darkness, Mum," my son said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I pretended to agree. I made no fuss. But in the middle of the night, I got up and plugged in a flashlight I kept hidden in my drawer. Small things, private victories. That was enough for now. Once they laughed at a soap opera where the old woman gave all her money to a neighbor. "Imagine being that stupid," my daughter-in-law said. "She probably didn't even know what day it was." I was knitting by the window. I didn't look up, but in my head I finished the woman's line for her. It was Monday, the day you lost everything. I spent more time in the garden, not to tend, but to listen. The garden didn't speak in insults, didn't sigh when I entered a room, didn't whisper about me 2 rooms away. It just breathed, and I breathed with it. One afternoon, I watched my daughter pick a rose I had grown from a cutting my mother gave me. She didn't ask. She gave it to her own daughter like it was hers to give. I said nothing, but I made a note. The more they pushed, the quieter I became. They mistook it for decline. They didn't understand that silence is where mothers retreat when words no longer reach their children. They didn't know silence has sharp edges. I began writing letters at night, not to them, to people who mattered once, people they'd erased from my life. My brother in Abuja, my cousin in Ibadan, my late husband's former law clerk who still remembered the name of the man who built this house from sweat and faith. I mailed the letters on days they were gone. I started leaving cups unwashed. Not because I forgot, but because I wanted them to see what a house without me would look like. They didn't clean them. They just pushed them aside, like I was already dead. One day, they laughed about the funeral buffet of someone else's mother. "So much rice and nobody even cried," my daughter said. My son smirked. "People don't cry when they've already let go." I looked down at my hands. Wrinkled, yes, but not weak. I had carried both of them in these arms, bathed them, sang them through fevers. Now those same arms sat idle, while they rehearsed my end. That evening, I removed one painting from the hallway. Just one. The one of our old house in Zaria, my husband's favorite. I wrapped it in cloth and placed it under my bed. That's when I knew I was no longer living with my children. I was surviving among strangers in my own blood, and survival is not a passive state, it's a waiting game. And I was getting very, very patient. It was the notebook that betrayed them. Not mine, hers, my daughter's. She left it open on the kitchen table thinking I'd gone to bed. It was one of those spiral-bound planners with pastel quotes. "Good things come to those who hustle." Inside, between reminders for spa days and credit card bills, was a page titled "Mummy Transition Plan." The bullet points weren't gentle. Call lawyer about transfer deed book, tour at Hillside Assisted Living. Show her one option. Start donation piles, old clothes, photo albums, etc. Talk to uncle in Dubai. Tell him she's fading. Pre-split furniture with AO, TV to us, piano TBD. There was a smiley face next to the last line, a joke. A giggle scratched in ink. My life reduced to a checklist, my history to items to be claimed or discarded. I closed the notebook without a sound, went back to my room, and I didn't cry. Not even a little. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table with them, listened to their small talk, laughed when they laughed, told them the tea was lovely, even though it was cold. My daughter handed me an envelope. Her fingers were too eager. "Just some options we've been exploring, Mom." Inside, glossy brochures, smiling elderly people holding puzzles, sunsets, gardens. Independence with help. "It's not a home," she added. "It's like a community." I looked at the photos. None of the faces looked like mine. None of the walls felt like they had memory. I folded the brochures carefully and placed them beside my untouched tea. Then I looked at my son. "Will there be room for your piano?" I asked softly. He blinked. "What?" I smiled. "If you're moving in officially, I assume you'll need space for it. You loved that piano, didn't you?" He stared at me, just long enough to realize I wasn't confused. I was awake, fully. That afternoon, I made a call. Not the first, not the last. Just the final one I needed to make. 2 days later, they threw a party. Not for me, for themselves. A housewarming for their friends, though no one had moved. They invited neighbors I barely knew. They ordered wine I'd never heard of. They hired a DJ, and not once. Not once did they ask if I wanted music in my living room. I watched from the hallway, a stranger in my own walls, every framed picture of my wedding, my children, my mother, tucked away. In their place, LED signs, throw pillows with quotes like "vibes only," and a charcuterie board shaped like a heart. That night, after the last guest left, my granddaughter spilled orange soda on my rug. She looked up at me and said, "Oops." My daughter laughed. "It's old anyway." She didn't know that rug was the last gift my mother ever gave me. I knelt down and blotted it myself, not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember how it looked before they stained it, before they stained everything. Later, I found my wedding album on the kitchen counter, coffee ring on the cover, one page torn. No one admitted to it, they didn't have to. The next morning, I slipped out while they were sleeping, went to the lawyer's office with a folder of signed documents. Inside were letters, receipts, and 2 copies of a will they thought they'd rewritten for me. They were wrong. They had forged a version once, badly. I let them think I hadn't noticed, but now I handed over the real one, the final one. "Are you sure?" the lawyer asked, scanning the names. Absolutely. No children listed, just the name of... He paused. I nodded. Yes, her. He raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. She's the only one who still knocks before entering my room. That evening, they came home with shopping bags, bought new curtains for our master bedroom. They'd already started changing the house. Paint samples on the wall, a blueprint spread across my dining table, a vision board pinned with cutouts labeled "After She Moves." I stood in the hallway watching them argue over light fixtures. My son said, "It needs more natural light." I said nothing, but I remember thinking, the sun is about to set for both of you, and this house will remember who truly opened its doors and who just waited for the keys to fall. They thought I couldn't open the locked cabinet in the study. They didn't know I still had the key, not the copy they found in the silverware drawer, the one they switched out. But the original, taped to the back of a frame in my room, the one with my mother's picture in it. It was always her watching over me. That night, I waited until they left for their game night. I opened the cabinet. Inside, a folder marked "May Assets Transfer Ready," my husband's death certificate, and a printed email exchange between my son and a real estate broker, titled, "We'll move on her by end of month. Move on me." Like I was a piece on a board. Not the one who bought the board and set the game in motion. I took photos of everything, sent them to an email account I created under a false name months ago. Backup for the backup, just in case. The next day, I put their favorite mug in the freezer, watched it crack from the inside, didn't say a word when they blamed each other. Small fractures. All I needed now were bigger ones. My granddaughter left her tablet on the couch, unlocked. Inside, text messages between my daughter and her. Pretend Nana's hearing is bad, makes it easier to talk. She'll forget anyway, LOL. Ugh, she wore the same dress again. The same dress I wore the day I took both their names to the bank. They weren't just mocking me, they were rehearsing my disappearance. So I started rehearsing too. Not for a disappearance, for a performance. At dinner, I asked about the house renovation they wanted. "Which wall are you tearing down first?" They beamed. "The dining one. We're opening the space up, makes it more modern." I nodded, sipped my soup. Imagine that same wall collapsing under the weight of betrayal. Next morning, I met someone at the gate, someone they didn't recognize. Chinaza, my former student, now a lawyer, now a storm wrapped in silk. She stepped in for tea, spoke softly, took no notes. But when she left, she had the entire timeline, the documents, the emails, and the audio clip I'd saved from their living room. She's barely there anymore. Let's do it before the holidays. She wasn't just preparing a legal defense. She was preparing a reckoning. 3 days later, I walked in on my daughter practicing what she'd say to the church when I transitioned. "We've decided it's best. The move was mutual." Move? No, it was a relocation, but not mine. That night, I went to the garage. They'd boxed up my memories already, labeled them junk, donate, and unclaimed. Inside one was a bundle of letters from my late husband, and one envelope I had never seen before. It read, "If they ever forget who you are, remind them." Inside, a second unsigned deed, dated after our last will, left blank for recipient name, but notarized. He had predicted this, planned for it, saved me with one last move, his final gift. That was twist 1. Twist 2 came the next morning. I received an anonymous letter in the mailbox, no return address. Just a single sheet of paper. "They've already set your move-in date. Hillside, Nov 6. They called it Operation Freedom. Check the call log." I did. It was there. 3 calls. One 27 minutes long. The day I thought they took me out for lunch to connect. They were dismantling me with smiles, so I started laying bricks behind their backs. The maid, who they paid poorly and treated worse, she became my informant. The neighbor they mocked for being nosy. She gave me copies of every package they received marked legal. And the piano tuner? Turns out he overheard their private conversation in the backyard. She doesn't even know what day it is. She'll sign anything if we give her the memory book first. The third twist? I mailed a copy of my real will, the one they didn't know existed, to a local radio host. He runs a segment called Silent Hands, Loud Stories. I didn't give my name, but I did give every detail. Let the public feel the bruise before the slap comes. At breakfast, they planned their holidays. Let's do Bali this year, after the transfer goes through. She'll be settled by then. I stirred my tea. No sugar, no milk, no smile. They thought the curtains were closing on me, but I had already flipped the script. They didn't notice the envelope until they heard the knock. 3 sharp taps. Evening, just after dinner. They were bickering about curtain rods. The door opened, and Chinaza stepped in like she belonged there. My daughter's smile faltered. My son stood up too fast. "Can we help you?" he asked, voice dry. "I'm here to help your mother," she replied. They both looked at me. I didn't move, just stirred my tea. Slow and steady. "Is this a social visit?" my daughter asked. "No," Chinaza said. "It's business and clarity." She placed a manila envelope on the coffee table, unsealed, heavy with truth. My son reached for it. "Don't," I said. He froze. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, backing away. But I kept talking. I used to think silence was survival, but silence became permission, and I never gave you permission to erase me. My daughter scoffed. "Erase you? Mom, we've done everything for—" "No," I cut in, voice cold. "You did everything to the version of me you built in your heads, the frail one, the fading one, the woman you planned to bury before her heart stopped." Chinaza handed them both smaller envelopes. "These are your copies, legal, notarized, time-stamped, certified recordings included." "Of what?" my son asked, eyes narrowed. "Of you," I said, smiling now, "at your most honest." They didn't speak, just stared at the paper like it might bite. "The documents inside," Chinaza continued, "outline a full transfer of this property to a beneficiary selected by May under Clause 7C of her husband's estate agreement. Your names are not included." "You can't do this," my daughter snapped. "We were going to take care of you. You were going to relocate me like I was an old vase," I said. "Tell strangers I was confused, throw away my memories, split up my furniture while my tea was still warm." I stood up. My knees didn't shake. "You didn't plan for me to still be alive when the dust settled." They started pacing. My son's hand ran through his hair. My daughter picked up her phone. "We'll fight this," she whispered. "Good," Chinaza replied. The court loves recordings, especially ones with timestamps and context. She pulled out a small USB drive and dropped it on the table. It clicked like a gavel. My son tried a different tactic. "Mom, come on, you raised us better. Family doesn't do this to family." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're right, family doesn't, but you did." He opened his mouth again. I raised a hand. He closed it. "Do you want to know who I left the house to?" Silence. "It's not a stranger." They leaned in, hopeful. "It's someone who knocked before entering my room, who brought tea without asking for anything in return, who still believes elders are not furniture to be moved when the layout changes." My daughter's voice cracked. "The maid! You gave it to the maid." "No," I said. "I gave it to dignity." And she chose who deserved it. They didn't speak after that, not right away. My son sat down. My daughter blinked too fast. I picked up the envelope again. "I could have left you something. I could have forgiven. But you didn't ask for forgiveness. You asked for space. And now you have plenty." Chinaza stood. "You have 30 days to vacate. Legal notice has been served. The new deed is filed. Attempting to contest will only expose more of what you've said and done." She handed them one more paper. "Consider this your final favor, a clean exit, not a public one." I walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned and asked, You want to say the last word? I looked back at my children. I already did. I closed the door. Soft. Final. Back in the living room, they didn't look at me. I didn't need them to. They weren't seeing me anyway. Hadn't for years. But now they would feel me. In every wall, every creaking floorboard, every cupboard with history they threw away. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, steady hands, clear eyes, and a heart no longer asking to be seen. They didn't speak to me for 3 days, not a word, not a whisper. The air in the house thickened, not with guilt but resentment. They moved slower, quieter, but not softer. Every door slammed harder than before. Every glance was sharper. They weren't grieving the loss of a house. They were grieving the version of me they thought would never speak. I passed my daughter in the hallway. She turned her face away like I was a ghost. I almost smiled. If I was a ghost, I was the kind that moved furniture in the night, the kind that remembered. That afternoon, she cornered me in the kitchen. You humiliated us. I was peeling an apple. I didn't stop. No, I said calmly. You did that yourselves. I just opened the blinds. She stepped closer. You've turned us into villains. For what? Some maid with a sad story? I set the apple down. Her story wasn't sad until you touched it. My son walked in, shoulders stiff. We were trying to build something here, move forward, secure the family. I looked at him. Build? You started with demolition. You stripped my walls before you checked if I was still living in them. He pulled out his phone. People are going to know, Mum. You didn't keep this quiet. Shinaza didn't either. Let them know, I said. Let them watch. Let them whisper. I leaned forward. You know what happens when people talk. They remember. And when they remember, they ask questions. And when they ask questions, truth travels faster than shame. My daughter slammed a plate in the sink. Shards flew. One grazed her wrist. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. Later that evening, I found them sitting together on the couch. For the first time, no music, no phones, just silence. I stood in the doorway. They looked up. Why did you do it? My son asked. Why her? Why not us? I stepped forward, folded my hands. Because she still saw me. Not the idea of me. Not the version you edited in your heads. The real woman. The one who cried alone in this house when your father died. The one who sewed your school uniforms when money was low. The one who never asked for repayment, only respect. My daughter's voice cracked. We were scared. I tilted my head. Of what? That we'd miss our chance. That you'd forget. That you wouldn't plan anything. That everything would fall on us. So you planned over me instead. She nodded. It was the first honest gesture I'd seen in months. I sat across from them. No anger now, only finality. I didn't write you out of my life. I just wrote you out of the part you were trying to steal. My son looked away. We didn't think you had it in you. That's the problem, I said. You stopped thinking I had anything in me except a signature. I stood slowly. You won't be homeless, you'll have enough, but you won't have this house. I looked at the walls, the memories. You don't inherit a home by blood. You earn it by memory, and you abandoned those long before I signed a thing. As I walked away, my daughter whispered, She won't love you like we did. I turned. Good. She'll love me better. The church invited me to speak at the Women's Legacy Luncheon. They expected a gentle tale, maybe a sweet memory or a poem. Instead, I brought the truth, wrapped in a ribbon of grace. I wore my oldest brooch, the one they always said was too dated. Chinaza stood at the back, arms folded, watching. I stepped to the mic, cleared my throat. Some legacies are passed down in silence, others in song. Mine was nearly stolen in paperwork. A ripple through the room. This year, I rewrote my will, I continued, not out of spite, but out of survival. Gasps, murmurs. I smiled. Let them wonder. The clip made it online the next day. A niece posted it. It spread. The radio show picked it up, the same one I'd mailed the letter to. They didn't say my name, but everyone local knew. And more importantly, my children knew. The story wasn't buried with me. It was blooming. 2 weeks later, my daughter called. She sounded tired. "You told the world?" "I told my story," I said. "If that embarrasses you, maybe it wasn't yours to tell in the first place." The eviction deadline approached. They packed slowly. Each box felt like a judgment. They didn't argue anymore, didn't ask for extensions. One night, I found a note on my bedside, from my son. "Sorry is late, but it's still real." No signature, just a drawing, a small bird like the ones we used to watch together. The new deed was officially registered, not to Chinaza, not even to the maid, to a trust in my name, one that would fund education and housing for single women starting over at 60. The home became more than shelter. It became a promise. I wouldn't let the pain end with me. A journalist showed up one day, young woman, eager eyes. "Would you like to go on record?" "No," I said. She looked surprised. "Why not? You've inspired so many." I sipped my tea, because stories like mine shouldn't need to be headlines. They should be warnings. She nodded, left without pressing. She understood. At the grocery store, a woman stopped me. "You're the lady from the clip, aren't you?" I smiled. "Depends on who's asking." My daughter saw it. We talked for 3 hours after. First time in months. She squeezed my hand. "Thank you." Justice wasn't loud. It didn't come in handcuffs or courtrooms. It came in understanding. It came in ripples. My children had to live with a different kind of inheritance now. The kind where every neighbor knew what they tried to do, but no one shouted. No one threw stones. They just watched. And the watching was enough. My son tried to donate to the trust, sent a letter, a check, no return address. I sent it back, with a note. "Some debts can't be paid in money. Come sit with me instead, if you can." He hasn't yet, maybe one day. The house is quiet now, not hollow, just calm. I walk it slowly in the mornings, open the windows, let the air remember me. Sometimes the neighbor's child runs through the garden. I don't scold, I wave. Let life continue. Let memory live. One evening, I sat on the porch. A woman I didn't recognize walked up. She looked nervous. "Is this the May house?" "It is," I said. "My mother used to work here. You paid for her hospital bills once." I nodded. She was worth it. She blinked back tears. "I'm one of the women your trust helped. I start classes next week. I just wanted to see where it began." I smiled, moved over. "Sit a while." She did. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Justice had already spoken. The house didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like breath held and slowly released, like old wood exhaling after years of strain. The walls stopped listening for insults, the floors no longer braced for stomping feet, and the kitchen, once tight with tension, felt like it could hold warmth again. I began my mornings the way I used to before the noise, boiling tea in my copper kettle, slicing apples just thin enough to fold over toast, and sitting in the patch of sunlight that used to hit my husband's chair. I didn't talk to the shadows anymore, not because they weren't there, but because I no longer needed to explain myself to the ghosts of the ungrateful. The wind carried voices from the school down the road, children laughing, running, breaking rules I once scolded my own for. I let the window stay open, let the noise come in. It was the kind of noise that didn't ask me to disappear. A few letters came in, a neighbor's apology folded inside a birthday card, a thank you note from a woman I'd never met, now living in a shelter paid for by the trust. No return addresses, just gratitude. Quiet, invisible, clean. My children hadn't called, not since the move-out day when my daughter stood by the U-Haul, arms crossed, eyes blank, and asked me, almost whispering, "Will you ever forgive us?" I told her the truth, that forgiveness wasn't a gift I could wrap and hand over, that it had to be earned like trust, one honest act at a time. She nodded, said nothing more, and drove off before I could see her cry. I kept the folded drawing my son left, the little bird, tucked it inside the old cookbook he once spilled milk on when he was 5. The page still rippled, still scented like cinnamon and accidents. I didn't forgive, not yet, but I didn't throw it away either. The tea set my husband bought me, the one they tried to donate without asking, was back in the cabinet, polished, whole. I used it now and then, not for guests, not for show, but for mornings when I needed reminding that some things, once loved deeply, could be cleaned and used again. The portrait in the hallway remained, me in my wedding sari, sharp-eyed, young, unknowing. I nodded to her sometimes, not because I missed her, but because I finally understood her silence. Justice hadn't changed me. It had returned me. The night before the Trust's first scholarship dinner, I lit the porch lamp and sat outside with my shawl wrapped around my shoulders. I didn't expect visitors, but I left the gate unlocked anyway. Around 9, a boy from the school passed by, kicked his ball too far, and came stumbling up the path. He looked nervous. "Sorry," he said, holding the ball out, eyes wide like he expected me to scold him. I smiled. "You have a strong kick," I said, handing it back. He grinned and ran off without another word, but paused at the end of the path to wave. I waved back. That was it. No speech, no grand gesture. Just a boy, a ball, and a wave. Sometimes peace doesn't roar. It rests. 5 years later, the ivy has grown back over the east wall, covering the cracks we once ignored. The garden gate swings easier now, the rust worked out by time and use, and the front porch hums with the weight of afternoons spent reading letters from women I'll never meet, but somehow understand better than my own blood. The house is no longer mine in name, not entirely. The Trust handles repairs, manages visits, funds the women who move through its guest wing like quiet storms, tired, heart-bruised, but not broken. They arrive with backpacks and pasts and leave with plans and spine. I sit in the same chair by the kitchen window every morning, the one that catches the 7:40 a.m. light. I don't wait for anyone now. I just welcome what comes. My daughter writes twice a year, neatly, carefully. I can feel the restraint in her ink. Last letter came with a photo. Her daughter, my granddaughter, wearing a yellow ribbon I once stitched into her mother's hair when she was 6. The note said, "She found it in the attic box we left behind. She wears it like armor." My son visited once. We didn't talk about the house. We sat in the garden watching birds eat from the feeder. Chinasa refills every Friday. He didn't say much, but before he left, he placed a single biscuit, his favorite coconut cream, on the table and said, "I remember these." I nodded. So did I. He walked away slowly, didn't look back. That was enough. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead, because when you stop chasing legacy and start living by truth, you don't need the approval of those who mistook your silence for surrender. You just need a house that remembers and a future that listens. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever trusted the wrong people only to find your peace after letting them go? Tell me in the comments. Your story matters too. And if this touched you, this story was always meant for you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories. And tell me in the comments where in the world you are listening from. I love to know how far these stories travel.